Thank you. The title of my talk today is going to be Radical Creativity. So we we said yesterday that our practice, we could have titled it Creative Meditation. And I had said that that was a radical statement, or radical that we could do that. So I'm going to talk about the meaning of radical and the meaning of creative. And these are meanings that I put together. Radical can mean innovative, outside tradition or orthodoxy. So not separate from tradition, but outside of it, still connected to it. But it can also mean going to the root of things. So really advocating for deep, thorough change, going to the root. And creativity, of course, we pick definitions we like. This is one not solely about making art, but thinking of creativity as useful imagination. And again, this is kind of tied to the Buddhist tradition. Stephen Batchelor has, a secular Buddhist Dharma teacher, has talked about intention, translating it as imagination. And so I'm really considering a useful imagination with how we meet our lives and how we relate to our inner worlds and to people around us. So putting together radical and creative, I think it describes a practice that's alive, evolving, and very personal. And perhaps phrasing it this way, I'm really already pointing to something that is underway in reflective meditation. The seeds are planted for this. For those newer to practice, we have to remind them that we water these seeds and we wait and we have patience while things grow, and we don't know what will bloom from our experience in meditation. And I've seen many blooms in this group over the years. I feel like this daily online meditation Sangha offers that nourishment for growth. So I'm going to share a vignette that I found poetic, more poetic than I usually speak. So I just liked the sensibility of this text. It's called The Lost World of the Kalahari. And Lans van der Post, he writes about his time with the indigenous people in the Kalahari Desert. And they were shocked to discover that he couldn't hear the stars. This was like they thought he was joking. They couldn't even conceive that he didn't hear the stars. But when they realized that he truly couldn't hear them, they were deeply saddened. For the Bushmen and women, they really said not being able to hear nature, not being able to hear and listen to the stars was a serious affliction of deep disconnection. So van der Post, he writes a little bit about this and really recognized his limitations in listening. And he made a choice to learn, unlearn, relearn how to listen. I don't know. He didn't say whether he ever heard the stars, but that's another story. But I will take this in the direction of maybe listening and hearing the Dharma, and I'll use conditionality as the Dharma teaching. It could be any teaching that you would listen to. Maybe hearing the teachings, conditionality in our experience, is a little like hearing the stars. We have so many inner experiences, maybe as many as there are stars in the sky. How do we hear those experiences? How do we listen and string them into something meaningful and useful? So again, if someone's newer to this practice, this kind of listening and hearing might really feel unfamiliar because at first it is. Not everything that arises in meditation will make sense. nor does it need to. And it's not reserved for mystics and sages, this kind of listening. It's a learnable skill. But it does actually point to a process of an honest sensitivity to your experience, and also a kind of trial and error, bringing your inner world out into the world. It takes a lot of time like to try out some of the things you understand, the Dharma you understand from your experience, and putting it into action, into your everyday life. So this kind of inner vastness or inner complexity, I also look at it as not a problem to solve. It's a richness to explore, and that's very much a tenet of reflective meditation, is this explorative process. Still, in the city, I think there's a lot of noise. If you live in cities, most of us live in some kind of larger towns or cities. If you listen on social media, or if you're in the grip of trauma, or in the political climate that we're in, it is harder to hear at times. It really is harder to hear conditionality or the teachings in our experience. And the complexity of the outer world affects our inner world, and it can feel like too much. So sometimes I feel this sorrow that the Kalahari people must have felt seeing someone cut off from the music of the stars. I feel it in the world, and I feel it in people I care and love about. I want them to listen. I want me to listen. I want them to listen, to hear and know conditionality. So today I feel quite hopeful and inspired about this topic. I led a retreat, an online retreat last week for one of my small ongoing groups who actually chose this topic. So it's made me do a deep dive into it. They found a retreat center in Australia and Zoomed me in for 2 hours every day on the retreat, where we had a chance to sit and talk about the topic and meditate. And listening to them was like hearing the stars for me. So I want to give some little recap. One person questioned this traditional term in Buddhism that we often use to talk about experience as a mind state. And why give preference solely to the mind? Why call something a mind state? She lives in a body while meditating, and she was sitting outside, being a part of nature, and I'm sorry, this printer always regularly kind of speaks to me during my talk. I have to remember to turn it off. Okay, so let's see. She was sitting outside, being a part of nature, really letting her mind and body settle during a retreat and experiencing less separation between the inner and outer world. And she really found that to be radical and creative and wanted to live that way, really made an intention to wanting to live that way. Another person took a deep dive. She really felt like her daily life was just bobbing along, and she wanted to take a deep dive into her reactions. And not just look at the first reactions, but at the ones that followed, the ones that are under the surface that you can't see that often. And this morning I was thinking, she just reminded me of a scuba diver, one that goes in with goggles and a wetsuit and, meters to measure all these things. And she had like necessary supports to go on this deep dive on the retreat. And she had Dharma friends surrounding her to do this. And a third person, she saw her childhood home through a camera. Like suddenly she was like going around and filming her childhood. And she had all these memories of kind of creative, positive angle to what she considered a really difficult childhood with a lot of time alone in a large family. And she remembered and saw herself channeling her creative energy to build things that didn't make sense, unique pieces of art, not pretty, not very difficult to explain, but it was so much a part of her growing up and her later artistic life. So those vignettes that that happen commonly on retreat, they happen here on the daily online. I'm just going to tie them back to the Kalahari Bush people and how listening to the stars was, I consider, a radical creative act, and they considered it ordinary. So there's some way that this radical creativity combines with our everyday life, our everyday experience, which seems maybe a little bit ordinary, not really out of this world. But it connects us back to ourselves and to each other and to the sacred complexity of being alive.